Hello and welcome to the UDL-IRN session, Leveraging Technology to Remove Barriers, Not Create Them. My slide deck can be accessed using the short link on the screen. And before we get too far into things, I'll introduce myself. My name is Brenny Coomer. I am the coordinator of instructional technology for Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation in Columbus, Indiana. We are south of Indianapolis, north of Louisville, and just a little bit west of Cincinnati. So we're this unique crossroads. We are known for our architecture, and Cummins Engine Company is also based in Columbus, Indiana. So we have a lot of diversity and a lot of interesting architecture that Cummins has brought us. My email is on the screen if you would like to send me an email if you have any questions before, during, after this presentation. You can also follow me on Twitter. We can follow each other back and become Twitter famous together, or you can send me a message there and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Before I was in my role in technology, I was also a secondary social studies teacher at the middle school and high school level. My role in my district focuses on bridging the gap between educational technology and universal design for learning, which is our instructional framework in our school district. It drives all of our decisions and everything that we do, including our technology usage and what things we use in the classroom, online, not on our walls, pretty much everything to do with technology. So goals for our session today are to understand how to use universal design for learning for decision-making, tech decision-making and learning environment decision-making. We're also using universal design for learning to help identify learning barriers versus learner variability, because they're two very different things, and it's helpful to have that frame of mind when you're thinking about your learning environment. We're also going to be using universal design for learning, and a goal for this session is to think about how you can identify and practice using technology to remove barriers in times when technology maybe isn't the solution. We'll also at the end, hopefully, have at least 3, maybe more ways that we can use technology in the future based on what you learned in this session. If you have any session goals, think of those in mind during this session. And if we don't quite reach those, send me a message and I'll do my best to try to help you out. In terms of resources for the session, everything can be found in the link here, including my video, supplemental resources, as well as my contact information.
Going through my presentations and slides today, if you are using the Google Chrome web browser, something that's really helpful while you're toggling back and forth in between screens, if you don't want to close anything, is right across the top. If you right click and click pin, it will keep that tab open no matter what. You actually can't close it. So that's something that I personally learned in the session, and I love to do that now when I'm looking at resources so I don't close out of something and then have to go back. So you could actually do that with all the different tabs and resources in my session so that you don't lose anything and you always have it open and can come back to it whenever you need to and it's still open. Let's get started with our first audience question, which is just to give you some practice and get your feet wet and for me to see where everyone's joining from today. So you can either click here or use that resource that was on the Google Doc I just showed you. And next thing we're going to do, our next audience question, I'm going to move my little video person, me, to different sections so you can still see me. All right. I am going to ask you a series of questions here, and I promise they relate to the actual session itself, which focuses on technology and how to use it effectively. But first, I have a question for you. If I gave you a task to make banana bread, because as a millennial, this is what a lot of us, my age group, have been doing. Maybe you've been doing this as well during quarantine because baking has become a new passion and a way for us to entertain ourselves. Plus, leftover bananas. What else are you going to do with them, right? So if I gave you the task to make banana bread, how would you feel about that task? Of course, it can't be as simple as me just letting you use whatever resources you need to make the banana bread. I am going to give you a few things though. Let's see what this twist is.
All right, so now I've given you the task of making banana bread, and welcome to my quarantine kitchen. This is actually the kitchen from Friends, if you like that TV show. My kitchen does not look like this. My kitchen actually has a lot of dirty dishes in it right now, so that's something I'm going to do after I finish filming this. But your task is to make banana bread, all right? However, I'm going to add a twist here since I gave you that initial task. You're only going to have a few resources to do this, okay? So I'm going to give you a, let's see if it works here, a whisk and a handwritten recipe like the one you see on your screen. It's written in cursive. So put on your apron and let's get ready to cook by telling me first, how do you feel now that I've given you a whisk and a handwritten recipe to do this task? All right, so fill it out on that short link on your screen.
I'll give you a few minutes to do that, or you can pause the video. All right, now let's reflect before we move on.
Okay, so maybe you're feeling a little uneasy now that I gave you a twist and you only had a couple of tools and resources available to you to make that banana bread. Maybe some of you are banana bread all-stars and you know how to make that no problem with the tools at hand. You'll kind of work through it. Others of us, namely me, might have looked at that task and thought, okay, I definitely can't do that now. Maybe that recipe is too hard to read. Maybe I need different resources. I need something else to help me cook this recipe. I want you to think now, what would you need to be successful in making banana bread? Write some of those ideas down, and it's going to be on that next question, which is question 4 on that form.
All right, everyone, you can put your apron and your whisk aside. We're done with that task. But I'm hoping you realized a couple things by going through this activity and looking at the responses of others, which should have been visible to you. Some of us were very confident with that initial task. All right, we were ready to make the banana bread. We had that experience. We had the resources and tools that we needed. When I threw in a twist, that didn't affect some of your responses. Some people felt like I could still do this. I know people who would have been like, oh yeah, no problem. I can still make banana bread with those resources as being the only ones I have. Others of us might not have felt that way. And I'm hoping you realize that and then saw a difference in what tools you might have needed to be successful and the ones that were given to you. So the big idea here, and the way that I promise this all connects to the session on technology and universal design for learning, is think. When we design our lessons, we need to consider the needs of our learners and what tools that they'll need to reach that learning goal. And sometimes those tools and resources look different, right? Some of us might have been successful with just that handwritten recipe and knowing what to do. Others of us might have thought, I don't read a whole lot in cursive. Maybe this handwriting is hard for me to read. Maybe I need a visual or a video to follow along with. And I've included some of those examples on this slide as well. We all differ in the resources that we need because we're all different. And even though we might need different resources to get there, we can still accomplish that same learning goal. However, if I only give you a couple tools and everyone gets the same thing, that's a problem. Why? Because not all of us need the same resources and we might differ. So when we think about our learning environment and the way we set up our lessons and our activities and our classroom and maybe our online environment itself, we need to consider the same things. Are the tools that we give our students relevant? Are they connected to that goal? When I've done this presentation with a similar type of beginning before and have told people the only resource they can use is a whisk, some people are like, that isn't even relevant to this recipe, right? If we're giving our students a resource that doesn't help them, maybe because we think it's a cool tool, but it doesn't necessarily associate itself with that learning goal, that's an issue. When we give our students tools and resources, whether they're tech tools or physical resources, we need to make sure they're accessible to our students. That handwritten recipe is not accessible to all of us. And we need to make sure that the tools and resources we give them are usable. Some of us might have thought, I cannot spin and mix those ingredients together with a whisk because I've never used that resource before, or maybe it's just not the most appropriate one for my physical needs. I would maybe benefit with a stand mixer or hand mixer or something along those lines. The big picture here is that when we think about our learning environment, the tools that we use can be very powerful in making things accessible or not. So on this slide, I'm just showing you all these different tech tools out there and how those connect to what we're talking about today. The EdTech industry in the United States and globally is a massive industry, and it just continues to grow. Technology has been super powerful in how we learn. It's helped our learners travel around the world when maybe those means and resources aren't there in the form of a virtual field trip. It's helped our students learn new languages or decode languages if they're still learning how to speak them. Technology has provided some of our students the ability to see or to read or to have a voice when maybe some other accessibility tools didn't previously exist. So I'm not trying to bash technology here. Technology is what I love. It's a part of my job. I'm just going to use this presentation to show you that technology for its own sake and technology on its own is not creating things, making things automatically more accessible. Using technology is not just, that's not how you do UDL. Using technology effectively and using UDL as the guiding way of deciding what tech tools you use or don't use, that's how you leverage technology to remove barriers. Otherwise, it can create problems. If I change that learning task before, instead of making you use banana bread as your learning goal, and instead I say, all right, you're going to share what you've learned about ancient Rome through a presentation. And the only presentation tool that I give you is maybe a Flipgrid, because Flipgrid's super popular. I really want to use it. I'm enticed to use that tool. That's exciting. That's a problem. That creates some barriers. Even though I might think, oh, that tool is flexible, it's great itself, using only one tool and just using the tool for its own sake, not thinking about the big picture, the goal, what I really want my students to do, and what ways they can get there, that causes problems. And that's why it's important that while we are intrigued by technology and we want to use it, that we use some type of framework to guide our decisions. So the big thing I want you to think about in this presentation is how can we use technology in meaningful ways? And there's really a couple of main points I'm going to drive home here. I keep moving my video because my slides change a little bit. The ways that you can make the most of tech, there's 5 guiding principles that I want you to follow. Number 1 is being purposeful. Focus on the learning goal. Plan for variability because variability is our norm. Emphasize accessibility and be a champion for it. Apply universal design for learning to remove barriers. Don't apply tech first and then use UDL afterwards. UDL should be what we use from the very beginning and which should drive what technology decisions we make in the first place, not vice versa. And reflect, revise, reiterate, redesign. I'm going to go through each one of those as well as show you some tech tools and give you some hands-on experience with them. If at any point in this presentation you need to pause or you need more time to work on something, you have complete discretion to do that. That is the beauty of an asynchronous presentation. You can go at your own pace. All right, so speaking of universal design for learning, while technology can be exciting, it can definitely power our learning, without a research-based guide to follow and to determine our decision-making, technology can become a tool without purpose and disengagement for our learners. So kind of what I was getting at already, a little bit ahead of myself. But if we just use technology for its own sake, that might actually be causing more harm than good in our learning environment. So how can we make sure that we don't land ourselves in that situation where our students are so frustrated by the technology they can't even focus on the learning goal? As a lot of us have been teaching remotely and virtually over the last few weeks, we've probably had instances of this happening where our students are tasked with using a new technology tool and maybe they can't really focus on the content goal because the tech tool is too hard. So how can we bridge that gap? How can we make sure that we use technology without it being a frustrating or barrier-ridden experience for our students? The first thing that we can do is really focus on the framework. I'm not going to go through each one of these because chances are you're in this summit and you have some background, but if you want to get a little bit more background, it is linked there for you to use. But the main thing here to focus on is that you use UDL for decision making. All right, use that as your guide. Think, if I use this tool in my learning environment, what options does it provide? What limitations does it provide? Or is it actually creating more barriers for my students than not? So the first thing that we can do is focus on our learning goal rather than the tech first. So if we're focusing on our learning goal, then we're focusing on that content, not I just want to use Flipgrid for Flipgrid's sake. I'm not bashing Flipgrid. I love it, but I'm just using that as an example. And making sure that our goal is learner-centered. So our learners' vocabulary should be in that goal. It shouldn't be something that's too hard for them to understand. We need to make sure that our goal is free of the means. So by putting the means in our goal, by saying our students will explain the importance of Roman achievements by doing a Flipgrid video, we've just eliminated all other options and choices our students have and are creating a barrier by doing that. We need to make sure that our resources align with the goal. So again, if our goal is flexible and it's learner-centered, then we need to make sure we provide tools that support that. And a couple of questions to kind of frame your lesson planning here. Consider, how can learners achieve the goal I've made for them? How can tech help provide options to reach this goal? And am I using tech for its own sake? So by using a Flipgrid as a way for students to show their understanding of this learning goal with ancient Rome, am I just using that because I want to use Flipgrid, or does it actually give my students another option? I'm going to show you an example here, and you can work through one maybe from your own learning environment as well. All right, so here's the example. I was a social studies teacher, so this is the one I kind of fall back on quite a bit. Okay, so my example here, the standard is to understand the importance of river valleys in ancient times. So this is a pretty loaded goal if you're a social studies teacher. You know that. I'm going to break that down, and instead my students are going to focus on, this is the learner-centered goal. I will be able to explain the importance of the Nile River in ancient Egypt. So this is a sample activity. This is actually a sample one from when I was in the classroom. And I'm just going to give a disclaimer right now. This is not a perfect lesson. And that's exactly why I'm showing it to you, because I'm not perfect and neither was this lesson. The lesson activities I gave my students to reach this goal, they could read a Google Doc that explains some of this information. And then their way of showing their understanding, I told you about Flipgrid for a reason. The way that they could show their understanding was to do a Flipgrid video. Now, if you've ever used Flipgrid before, it is a video response platform. So your students can make a video, they can be in the video, or they can hide their faces. So when I initially thought of this lesson, I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is a fun tool. My students have a choice in how they show their understanding, that they can be on the camera or they don't have to be on the camera. But really thinking about this, were there other ways my students could have reached that goal, explaining the importance of the Nile River, other than a video or really audio recording? Definitely. I had some students who were shy, who struggled with this, or who just didn't do the assignment in general. And looking back, I was using technology for its own sake. I thought, oh, this would be a fun thing to try out. This is great. When it actually created more barriers for my students than not. So looking at this goal and tweaking it just a little bit, and again, you could have paused right there before you move forward with me. If I changed my lesson activities, my goal is student-centered, that works. It's tied to my standard. But if I change my lesson activity to where students have some more flexible options here, that makes a big difference. All right. My example is that I'm giving my students more options here, but they're optimized. I don't want to give a whole smorgasbord of options, because that can even lead to decision fatigue, where students feel so overwhelmed with the options they have in front of them, they can't make a decision. So you don't want to give them too many. A couple optimized ones will work. But I actually had more barriers in this lesson beforehand than I do now. So the way I fix this is options and learning resources. I only gave my students the first rodeo a Google Doc, which is a start, but there could have been other resources there. If it was all text-based, that's not very visually engaging for my students. So the option here was the students could have used a printed reading. I had hard copies made when I improved this lesson, a Google Doc so they could listen if they needed to have it read out loud, and a video with captions that I found that covered the same information. So again, students had choice there. They had options in how they could learn that content other than the one I just gave them before. Again, technology helped with those resources, but there's also a non-tech one there with the printed resource. Options to show their understanding. When I really thought through this lesson again, and I worked with a UDL coach in my building, what are some other things I could have done to have students show their understanding, where they're still showing me the importance, but they have choices in how they can do that, that allow students who maybe don't want to be on video or have a hard time articulating in a speech their understanding. I gave them different choices here. So I gave them Flipgrid. They could write or type a response. They can do an audio recording, or a different idea. The results from this lesson were much more successful, right? I wasn't so focused on the technology. I really thought about that learning goal and how I give my students different choices to get there. So the results from this were much better for my students, and I actually have some examples from this lesson in particular. Here was a written response. A student typed out a response. Here was a Flipgrid video. I still had some students who wanted to do that. This student in particular loved doing video responses. It was right up her alley. It's what she liked to do. But another thing here, by adding in that other option of students just being able to come up with their own solution, I had a student who made a 3D model. Now, this was a couple-day lesson, so they had some time to work on this. But again, giving options here, flexible options, rather than just limiting my students to a Flipgrid only, this yielded so much better results, and my students all got an understanding of this and could all showcase their understanding. Whereas with the Flipgrid, we didn't get that. So when you're focusing on technology in your lessons, don't just focus on using tech for its own sake. Focus on using UDL to drive those decisions. Focus on the goal and then the means later. Next thing to focus on when we're designing our learning environments and looking to use technology is that our brains are very unique. Plan for variability, because variability is the norm. I'm sure some of you have seen this cartoon before. It's really popular, usually around standardized testing season for a reason. And this is, again, showing that all of our students might be different in how they like to showcase their understanding. Their interests are different. What engages them, disengages them is different too. So when we design our learning environment, use the same approach, right? The same technology that works for one student might not work for the other. Giving you all the whisk in that first cooking example, that didn't work for everyone, right? So when we give our students all one means to show their understanding with tech, that's also a problem, okay? So if I think about my learning environment, if I gave my students only a Google Doc as a way of showing their understanding, or is the only means to develop an understanding of a topic, that's assuming that that one size resource is going to work for everyone, which creates more problems, right? That's not using technology to remove barriers, that's using it to create them. So when you think about your learning environment, plan for variability up front. Don't wait afterwards. If you can get out ahead of it, that's the most important thing we can do. And again, use UDL as your guide. A one-size-fits-all approach with technology doesn't work either. So thinking about learner variability and barriers, very key differences here. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples here. Learner variability. Variability is something that's internal. It's what makes our learners unique. It's their differences. It's the things that we can celebrate. It's what makes them themselves. So examples is that we might have an English language learner or someone who's hearing impaired, excels in reading or reads at a certain level, limited background knowledge of a topic in one class or more background knowledge in another class, shy or outgoing, excels in music. Barriers are those external things, those factors that influence a student's understanding in the learning environment. It's something that we have control over, right? We don't have control over all barriers or all external factors, but we have some control over the ones in our learning environment. So if we're looking here, examples of barriers, again, are not learner focused. It's external, okay? So a lot of things that we see sometimes and when a lesson doesn't go so well is some teachers think, well, the student didn't get it. If you take that blame off of the student and instead focus on the learning environment, it makes things seem a lot more manageable and that you're more empowered to bring change. So examples here is that the text is too difficult. Instead of saying limited reading level, the text is too difficult, all right? That's something that we can change. We can simplify the text. Hearing audio is challenging. Maybe I should provide something other than just using audio for that student. Other barriers, one method to show understanding. Prime example here, when I showed you that Flipgrid a few minutes ago, that was a barrier, right? For some of those students. Variability might be that I'm a really shy student. I don't want to be on a video. The barrier here is that I was only giving that option to show their understanding. Text is too small. Physical challenges presented by the activity. Discussion doesn't engage all learners. Challenging text. And again, those are all examples of barriers, things that are in the external learning environment that might influence that learner, but ones that we have control over and we can try to address. So I'm going to give you a sample one here. And I'm going to give you 45 seconds on the clock, or you can just pause this or skip ahead. I just want to give you some flexible options here. But what I want you to do is, looking at this scenario, I want you to practice identifying variability versus a barrier. And you can write those down on a piece of paper, or you can type it out on a sheet. But the main idea behind this activity is I want you to get practice identifying something that you have control over and something you don't, because our next phase in this is going to be focusing on how we can identify the barriers and solutions to them. Okay, so the scenario here, I have a student who's very quiet. She is easily discouraged and rarely raises her hand in class to share. She'll give up if she's having difficulty with a task. She reads below grade level. Okay, so 45 seconds on the clock. I want you to think about what the variability is and what the barriers are. All right, so our 45 seconds are up. Okay, so what are some examples of variability in this example? The student is quiet, discouraged, gives up, and is below grade level in her reading, right? Those are all things that are internal, that make her a part of who she is and make her different and unique from others. Okay, now examples of barriers in this. It's okay if you didn't get all of them. This isn't a all or nothing type of thing. I'm not giving you points for doing this. Barriers in this example: methods to share in class, right? So raising her hand, if that's the only method to share her answer or to show her understanding in that class, definitely a barrier, right? Task is too difficult is a barrier. So it says here she'll give up if she is having difficulty. Well, if the task is too difficult, then that's going to happen. Reading level of the text is also an example of a barrier here. So if I give her something that is way above grade level for her reading, and that's the resource she's going to use, and again, that's going to be a barrier for this student because her variability is she reads below grade level. Okay, so when we think about our learning environment, we need to make sure that we understand what our learner variability is, those things that are unique to them, that they're going to bring to class with them every single day, and then barriers, right? So things that are in the learning environment that we can try to change and we can try to remove to help address that variability, not expound it. Okay, so next phase is looking at accessible materials. So when we select technology for our students, we need to make sure that the resources we select are accessible or champions of accessibility. So the tools that we select, the more flexible they are in that they have text-to-speech options, they support different languages, or there are means in there to do these things, the better off our students will be and the more we can support them. You don't need to have a million tools in a lesson. If you can find a couple of tools that help learners, those are the best ones you can use. So consider what technology tools you want to use in your learning environment and if they support and champion accessibility. There are a couple things I linked here. I'm not going to spend tons of time going through those, but think about design and functionality. If you are using a learning resource and the text is really small and there's no way to enlarge it, that's not necessarily the most accessible text, right? If you're using video resources in class and you give that to students as a learning resource, that's great. But if there's not closed captioning available, that's going to be a barrier for some who might need that extra support. So when you select learning resources and technologies, try to test it for those accessibility things right on the front end before you even give it to learners and before you decide to include it in your learning environment. A way that you can do that is by using UDL as your accessibility checker. The learning barrier is that the only way the student can respond in the lesson is to raise their hand and say something out loud. Maybe we can find a tech tool that gives students another voice or a way to speak or to share their understanding other than just raising their hand. So technology is not a must in a learning environment. think technology on its own might create some barriers itself. The example I gave you earlier with Flipgrid, that's an example, doesn't work for everyone. But if we give our students choices, that's a key thing here. If we give them different ways, non-tech, maybe one with tech, we can help address that learner variability and reach a wider net. UDL can be our way of identifying the barriers so we know what targeted tech tools to apply to remove them. All right, everyone. So speaking of removing barriers, technology can be very helpful in removing barriers after you have identified them. So an example here is from earlier when we were looking at variability and removing barriers. If the student has a barrier and that raising their hand is the only way they can share their understanding in class, and raising their hand and saying things out loud is a barrier to them, then maybe we can find a tech tool that helps students share their response in a different way where they're not saying it out loud in front of everyone else. Another example is that maybe if reading the text is too difficult, right? It's above grade level, we can find a tech tool that can simplify that text right for the students, and they're empowered to do that. So technology can be very helpful in removing barriers after you have identified that initial barrier. So it's kind of like a step-by-step process. We make our learning goal. We identify the learning barriers that might exist for students in that goal after we know our learners' variability, because we have to plan for that first. We look at the different tools that we have available, select one that's accessible, and now we apply UDL and technology to help remove some of those barriers. But again, technology isn't a must, but it can be helpful. The resource that's on your screen right now is a Google Doc that you might have already opened already, but it is a very helpful tool. And the reason why I'm showing it to you is because you can use this resource to help you select technology that might help address barriers in engagement, representation, and action and expression. These are all tools that are pretty flexible in how they can be used in the learning environment. I'm going to go through some of them, but not all, but I did want to give you this resource and tutorials that accompany it in case you want to use it. All right, so you have that resource there. Now we're going to fly into using some of these tech tools. If at any point in time I go a little too fast for you, just know that you have the power at your fingertips to pause this, go back, tinker with the tool some if you would like, and then move forward from there. If I use a tool that you've already looked at before, feel free to skip ahead if you need to. So our first focus here is going to be focusing on some tools that can help remove barriers to engagement. So when we're thinking about engagement, we think, how can I get my learners excited and motivated to learn? How can I remove barriers that might prevent them from sustaining that motivation? So some examples here is that some of our learners might focus if they might struggle to maintain focus if they don't have that learning goal right in front of them and have our direction and our guidance. The resource I'm going to show you is one that is free to use. All of these ones are that I'm going to show you, and it is called Classroom Screen. This is a great resource to use if you're in a physical classroom, or if you're also teaching virtually and maybe doing a Zoom call or a Google Hangout. What it allows you to do is to communicate all of your resources on one screen, which can help minimize threats and distractions because students know what they're supposed to be working on. And it allows you to easily communicate lesson goals so they know what to work on and to stay working towards that. So to get to Classroom Screen, and on really any of my slides following this, if you click the word, where I have it linked here, or the icon, it will open it in a new tab on your browser. So here is how you use Classroom Screen. So it has all of these different buttons across the bottom. These are your tools. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can if you would like. Main ones to note: text. This is where you can write out your lesson goal. Make sure it's learner-centered and read the means. Be able to explain. All right, so that is my learning goal. Maybe I write some instructions below that. Select your learning resource and then show your understanding. If I'm doing this in a live lesson and I want to give my students some guidance here, I can do a dice, and maybe that helps them know what tasks to work on first, or it gives them instructions on what group of students to go work in. Maybe I am getting feedback from my students and I have them in table groups, and each table group has a number, and the number I click here corresponds to which group shows their work first. All right, so that's just ways that you can use that. I can close that to get rid of it on my screen. I can use a QR code to share resources for my students, maybe a video that corresponds to this goal is linked here at this QR code so they can have that. I can also draw and illustrate concepts if I need to. This is great for math teachers. Maybe we have work symbols in our classroom, and I communicate these to my students regularly, and they know, okay, when I see this symbol on the board, that means that it's a silent activity. Or they whisper, they share quietly with a neighbor, or maybe it's a large group discussion. We're all talking and working together. This is a way I can easily communicate that to my students. Traffic light, all right, so maybe it's a you do, partner work, or we all do together. All right, so that's something you can use here. Maybe it's pause, review your work, or start again. So you have some options there. Stopwatch and timer. I always felt like I was toggling back and forth between a timer and activities for my students in my classroom. So I love this tool because you can communicate your instructions and your goal, as well as a clock or timer there in case you need it. Clicking the wrong thing. All right, there's my timer. So I can set that timer there to help my students stay on task and know for how long they need to be working on something. Things with Classroom Screen is that you can use it as a poll. That's something that's fairly new, but it does not save your whole board here. If you wanted to save this, you could download it as a PDF. It does give you the options. You can share it with a student who wasn't in class that day, but the idea is that it just helps you communicate everything in one screen in real time. So that is how you use Classroom Screen. All right, so the next resource I'm going to show you that can help remove any barriers to engagement, such as staying on task and knowing what things to work on, is Google Keep. Again, this is just an option you can give students. You can also give them a paper checklist as well. But Google Keep, as I started to imply, is a virtual sticky note tool. It's cloud-based, so it saves automatically. It can be used on a phone, a Chromebook, iPad, a laptop like I am. That's why I love this tool, is that it's accessible in just that sense, is that it can be used on lots of different devices, no matter what devices your students are using. It helps students stay organized. It's a virtual Post-it note. And on those Post-it notes, you can add voice notes, you can add pictures, you can take pictures of your handwritten notes and it will actually transcribe them as well. Pretty phenomenal. That's a new feature. You can also add checklists into Google Keep too. So this is a really helpful resource if your students might be struggling with what tasks they have to manage that day and staying goal directed. With Google Keep, you as the teacher can create a Google Keep note with the list of everything to do that day, and you can share it with your students individually. All they need is Google account. So again, like I said, it is cloud-based, so that means that you have those wonderful collaborative features there for students. So here are some examples. You can add pictures like I did there. Maybe it's a task list. I can add little stickers there and share them with my students if they did a great job on an assignment. But in terms of helping students with engagement, if I want to make a sticky note with a checkbox like I did there, I just have to click Show Text Boxes. Add them. All right, so these are the things I send out to my students. I can just share it there by giving them access as a collaborator, and they can cross things off. I can change the color of it so it stands out more to them. I can add a picture if I need to. I can set a reminder so that on a certain day, I'll get a notification on my phone if I have the Keep app, or as an alert on my Chrome web browser that this is when this needs to be done. If I pin it, it stays up here at the top of my screen, so it's the first thing I see when I sign into Keep. This is also great for students if they're maybe older, high school, middle school, and they're working on a group project. They can all be working on a same Google Keep checklist to help manage some of that work. So again, here's something that's collaborative. It helps students stay goal-focused and goal-oriented, and it has all those different options with pictures, checklists, text, audio built in within this tool. So you can practice using Google Keep here if you want to experiment with it. The next tool and last tool I'm going to show you today in terms of engagement is another Chrome extension. It's also a website if you don't want to use it as a Chrome extension. And it is called Noisli. And Noisli adds a timer to your screen and can set some background noise that can help you stay focused, be more productive, or to block out other sounds. Some of our students like to work with music and noise in the background. Other students don't like that. So again, just know that this is an option you can provide to your students, but it might be something that helps students refocus and re-engage and identify what they need to be successful. So this is the technology that can provide that solution to that barrier of staying on task, right? Or maybe something that helps them calm down. If the task is too, maybe the learning environment itself is too quiet for students, that's a barrier. This could be that solution. Another barrier this could help address is maybe if a student needs to have music, but you block YouTube in your school because it's not appropriate all the time, this can be that solution as well. So to use Noisli, you'll have to add it as an extension, which is on that Chrome web store. I have it linked here. But after you do, it pops up here with your other extensions on your browser. To open Noisli, I will click it. I'm just going to close that tab. Okay, so if you want to log in, I already have an account, so that's what I'm going to do. But if you don't, you can create one for free. And you do have to have an account to be able to use some of the noises and things on it. But it will open in a new tab. If it doesn't and it just stays in this little short menu, that's perfectly okay. You still have access to some of these sounds. So the way Noisli works is there are some random noises here for productivity, and it says playlists. Those are ones that Noisli gives you for free. There is a paid version. I use this tool all the time. I have never had to use the paid version to get what I need. So if I want to have sounds play for 25 minutes, then what I can do is I can set my timer here. Maybe I want to be a little less time, a little bit more time. I have options in that all through this menu here. But let's say I want to have some background noise to be productive. And I have to turn my sound on for Noisli if it's not playing for you right away. Right, so we have some trains, it sounds like. And some coffee noises. If I want to listen to a different sound, I can pick a different one. Maybe I prefer to relax. I have all those options available. If I want to make my own playlists, I can combine by clicking on these different sounds here and save it to my favorites and give it a name. And that's what this one is. Outdoor noises in a coffee shop. So that whenever I open Noisli now in a new window, it shows all those playlists and I can play it right from there. So as a teacher, this is a helpful resource for you to use with your students. Maybe you have this on in the background, or you give your students the option to listen to their own Noisli playlist if they have. All right, so our next section here is focusing on how we can remove barriers to representation. So barriers to representation might take the form of language barriers, visual barriers we need to remove for our students by providing other options like audio or even text. So the first resource I'm going to show you is one that works in YouTube as well as Google Slides. There is the option to do this in PowerPoint as well, but I'm going to show you the Google Slides version. So within Google Slides, there's the ability to add automatic live closed captioning. So to do that, I'm in a Google Slides presentation. I'm actually going to close out of it for a second so you can see it in this way. Closed captions are super helpful for our learners who might, again, are trying to learn a new language and they need to see those written out words. It's helpful for anyone who might have a hearing impairment or anyone who really finds that helps them understand and pay attention to a video and understand the information. Again, it's just another option there for our students. So it could help remove some of those barriers. If I go into present mode, and on the bottom is closed captions, I just click it to turn it on and it starts going and it keeps up with me. Now, it does not save the closed captions after you present, like in a text file or anywhere else. And you can even toggle the location and the size of the font for the closed captions. And the reason why I haven't had it turned on this presentation is because I'm going to upload this into YouTube, which automatically close captions, and you don't want to have your closed captions on your closed captions. So YouTube also has the ability to turn them on. It's the same icon, the CC. You can turn it on, and on some of them, you can even change the language the closed captions is in. You can't change the language in Google Slides yet, but it is on the roadmap. In PowerPoint, you can. So again, this is just an option there. You will have to give it permission to use your microphone the first time. Other resources for representation and removing barriers there Read and Write for Google, there's lots of presentations within the Summit on Demand that reference this tool. I'm going to give you a quick crash course, but Read and Write for Google is your all-in-one representation barrier remover. Probably could have said that more eloquently. But what it does is it's an extension that works in Chrome. You can also get it to work on other devices and browsers if you need to, but it really removes so many barriers. And I feel like I say that a lot, but this is just one tool that I lean on quite a bit. It is your text-to-speech tool in one, your speech-to-text tool. You can do voice notes. You can translate words with this tool, highlight things, make annotations. It's a dictionary, a picture dictionary if you need more visuals. It's all in one. It works on websites, PDFs, and docs. So the version I'm going to show you right now is in a Google Doc. And why this is so helpful is, again, it transforms text into ways and gives your students supports they might need. So if a student is struggling with words, they can use the picture dictionary or just the plain dictionary to get that answer. And it's all within Read and Write. And I like it because it works on so many different tools. So here's an example, a Google Doc version. I'm going to change this so you can see a little bit better. But to open and use the Read and Write toolbar, to cross the top. Read and Write has a special right now where all teachers and staff and students have access to it for free because of the current pandemic, but usually teachers always have premium access. Students will have some of these buttons available to them in the free version. Teachers have all. So if I want to use this, I'll add it as an extension in the Chrome Web Store, which is on my previous slide if you need to do that. But once I do, it's the purple puzzle piece. And I want to have this read out loud. If you hover over any one of these buttons, it will tell you what it does.
The Nile River is in Egypt. It provides plentiful resources to the ancient Egyptians, such as food, water, clay, and means of transportation.
I'm going to stop that so she doesn't keep reading that to us. But again, see, it reads text out loud, it highlights things as it goes through it. Maybe I'm struggling with what some of these words might mean. Like, what is transportation? If I click dictionary, it will tell me. I can even highlight this and open it in another window if I need to. So I have that. Maybe if I want to see what the word transportation means, picture dictionary is one of my favorites. It gives me visuals, and I can even drag and drop those into my Google Doc. Other great features here, I can look up what words mean. So if I highlight a word and I do web search, it will give me web results on that word. I can translate words as well into different languages, and I can select what language I want to have that translated into. I can highlight things on this document like key vocabulary. Do that in different colors so I can separate my geography from just basic vocab. And whenever I highlight words, I can collect them and it saves them in another document. So it's kind of like I have my own note-taking tool there as well. So this also helps with action expression. If your students need a little bit of support with executive functioning and managing their information and their resources, this is a way of doing that. And it saves it in my Google Drive. Other supports here for representation. The example I gave earlier when we were looking at variability and barriers, a barrier for that student was if the text was too difficult. This is a resource that helps with breaking down difficult text and simplifying it for students. It's Rewordify. It is a free resource. You don't have to have an account to use it. And what it does is it allows you to paste in text from anywhere, and it simplifies it, gives you definitions of words, and even tells you which ones that it changed. So you can even set that threshold for how difficult you want the text to be. It also has a collection of classic pieces of literature on there as well. So maybe if I'm someone who's teaching Shakespeare or I'm teaching Mark Twain and the vocabulary is something that my students might need a little bit of extra support with, I can show them this tool. The resources are already there for me. I have to even paste it in if it's a physical book my students are using, and I can get that simplified version. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So if I go to Rewordify, it will open it in a new window in my presentation. And to paste in my text, I would just paste it in here. I'm going to click Rewordify, and it gives me Rewordified simplified version and my version. I can also go to classic literature and see what resources are there. So if I'm an English language arts teacher and I want to see what they have available, this is where I can go. All right, so if I am in the example here, I picked Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, a chapter. And here we go. Here is the Rewordified version. If I am curious about a word, if I click on it, it will tell me what it is, adjectives, things similar to it. And right here, anything that is yellow and highlighted means that this is the simplified text. And if I hover over it, it tells me the original wording. All right, so it gives me the simplified version, but if I hover over, I can learn what those actual words should have been. There are lesson activities here too. If you want to use this as a resource, it shows me parts of speech. I can even print this simplified version for my students as well. A tool to remove barriers to students in the classroom is by giving them something that's interactive. So instead of just giving a plain text or plain visual, why not combine all of those together into an accessible tool? So an example of that is Google Tour Creator. It is a free virtual tour tool. So there are a lot of paid ones out there, and that's the beauty of this, is that it's free. It allows you to make content come to life, which might be, again, something that helps with engagement. Plus, what's great is that you can add in audio transcripts, video, links, and resources so that you can make your tours more accessible to your students by giving them options and how they can understand that information. So there's a sample tour here. So if you want to play around and tinker with that so you get some practice and what it looks like and experiencing it as a user, as a learner, it is here. If I click on any points, it gives me some options there. There are also the ability to add in audio as well. So I can have my own audio recordings of me reading this out loud to my students as we go through this in class. They can plug in and listen and also read at the same time, which is pretty powerful. If I wanted to make my own virtual tour, I also have some options. There's a more step-by-step guide that I've linked here, but I'm just going to go through a really quick crash course right now so you can get some experience with it. And this is not only for social studies, this can be used for a variety of different things. There are templates out there if you don't want to have to start from scratch. You can borrow from some of these. That's what I did because I have never been to India. That's where we just were. There are some that are science related, social studies, lots of different choices. So if I'm going to start from scratch, we're actually going to use a little bit of an example from one I had earlier. Do new tour. I had to add a picture. So I'm going to put Columbus, where I'm presenting from today. For what better way to make your content come to life than to have students go there, right? You have to give it a category and create. All right, so it takes you into Street View. And the best thing to do here is to type in your location. It automatically puts you at Google headquarters conveniently. And points you there. And if this is what I want to use for my scene, or if I want to see what other ones are there, if I grab my little yellow peg man, I can drag and drop him somewhere else and get a different image. Maybe I don't want to be at State Farm, so I'm going to go back. All right, now I'm at a park. So I can add that as my scene. I'll click Add Scene in the bottom. And this is where I can customize it. All right. Put the actual address there. I can type out information. There is a character limit, so if I need to add more, I can always paste a link to a Google Doc there. My students can use that. I can also add in an audio background noise, so some music if I need to, or I can add points of interest, which draw students' attention to things. So within these points of interest, I can add additional pictures. More text, pictures like I said here, and an audio narration. So I could record myself explaining information about this tree to my students. Whenever I am finished, I can add another scene. It takes me back to that map where I type in the location and repeat this process. Whenever I'm finished with the whole thing, I would click publish and I leave it. It gives you some options here. I go with public so that my students can see this, and it gives me a link. I can copy that and share it with students or view tour. Just so you know, if you're using Google Tour Creator, the link that you get to share your tour can be used on a cell phone, iPad, tablet, web device, Chromebook, and that's another reason why this tool is great, is it's accessible in lots of different. All right, now moving on to the final UDL principle, which is ways for students to show what they've learned and show their understanding. If you are someone who uses whiteboarding quite a bit with your students and you want to give them the ability to draw out their response in a digital way, maybe if they use iPads or a tablet or something like that, Jamboard is a great way of doing that. It is a virtual whiteboarding tool. It's collaborative, so I could share it with you and you could be drawing on one with me. I can share it with my students and we can all be drawing and working on it together. I can add in text, insert media like photos, and it works on cell phones too. So here's a sample one. Again, this might be a really great option for a student who might be struggling with keyboarding, is a physical way to write out their response. Okay, so here are all my different buttons here on the side. I can change my different font and size of my pen here. I can change the opacity too. If I want to add in pictures, picture tool. If I want to add in a note like I did there. Yeah. And this is all on one slide in my Jam. If I wanted to change my background, I could. There's a graphing one. I have options. If I want to erase anything, it's over here. If I want to add another slide to this, I could also do that. And here's some examples of how you can use it. You can have students post their questions here, maybe at the end of a lesson. You can have them post out and think about their thought process as they're working as a group. I could even present this as almost a slideshow to the whole class. If I wanted to erase anything on a frame, that's what I did right there. I can do that. If I want to share this with students, I can share it directly with them so they can write on it or they can view it. So you have some options there. All the students need is a Google account to use that tool. Other options here. So in the example I gave earlier with identifying variability and learning barriers, sometimes participating by raising your hand in class is something that's a barrier for students who might be shy or not very outgoing. YoTeach is a back channel discussion tool. So it's a live chat room tool that your students can use and is another option for them in a way to remove a barrier with technology if speaking up in class is a little too hard. There used to be a tool called back channel chat. This is the new version of that. Essentially, they kind of phased that out. So it's called YoTeach and it's ran by Palms. So if you just look up YoTeach and it doesn't come up, make sure you type in that. This is the teacher view. So to make it, you'll have to make a chat room, make a YoTeach room. So I'm going to name this one. All right. You enable admin features. That basically means you have to set a password to join the room so it keeps random people from joining it and talking to your students if you don't want them to be able to. You can also set a password there. So I'm going to make my room and it takes a second. All right, so once my room has been created in YoTeach, I have to enter with a name. Agree. And now I can fully participate. So over here is where I write my message. I click enter to send it. Now everyone can see and it was me that said that. What's great is you also have other options in how you can communicate in this board. So if I'm struggling with something and I want to get my teacher's help, but I can't raise my hand and get her attention that way, I can click picture. I can take a picture on my device or add a picture and insert it there. I can even mark up my picture if I need to. Whenever I'm ready, I click this little send button and it sends it so my teacher can see. Quizlet is a way of helping your students support their executive functioning skills. So especially during remote teaching and learning, I feel like a lot of us have been juggling a lot of websites and resources and tasks, and it's a lot to manage. Your students probably feel the same and might need that support to help them manage the information. Wakelet is also great for not only that, but for also as a way for students to show their understanding. It's like a website tool. So students can combine everything and make their own little Wakelet and it looks like a website. They can add their own text and notes to it. So it's a little bit more comprehensive than just saving websites and saving links. But that's a way of using it regardless. You can use it as a Chrome extension. Just go to the website or on a phone. So you have some options there. And it's collaborative. So if maybe your students are working on a project together, they can save all of their research in one Wakelet and they both have access to it. If I'm helping students maybe organize their work for my e-learning lesson that day, my virtual learning, I can make a Wakelet and send each student their own task list. Or I can just use it as a teacher to save my lesson resources. So this is what it looks like after you've made your free account. And here are different Wakelet collections. I gave you a sample one here to look at, and I have Siberian Huskies as pets, so this is why they're there. But as you see, you can add lots of different media to a Wakelet. These are pictures from online. I just Googled Siberian Huskies. This is text. I could add things from my Google Drive. Here's a website, and if I wanted to edit my collection, if I scroll further down my page, I can edit this. This is what automatically came up when I pasted this, but I can edit my image and pick a different one if I needed to. I can add different text. I can even customize it. Automatically pulls a snippet of what the website has, but I can change that. I can reorganize things if I need to. With that further up, I can change my layout. If I want to add something to my Wakelet, that's a key thing to show you probably, but I would click plus. I can add from YouTube. And add. Now I have more Huskies. As you see, there's lots of options here. I can even add Flipgrid videos if I'm using that with my students, bookmarks. So if I'm going and doing research, if I'm using the Wakelet extension and be across the top here, I click that and I can select right there without even having to leave my website and save it to a collection. So it's just really great for managing resources and websites. It could also, like I said, be a project tool like this example. It could be a scrolling e-portfolio of your students' work during the school year. It can be my lesson planning guide if I'm a teacher. Whenever I'm finished, I can do done. And if I want to have someone else be able to edit this, that's where I can give them editing rights as contributors. If I want to share this so others can see, I have ways of doing that. I can do this in Teams, Remind, Google Classroom, a link, or a QR code. With universal design for learning, the job is never done. Our students vary from day to day, even hour by hour. What might work or might be a great learning option for them one day might be a different tool the next day. So it doesn't mean it's not impossible, but it just means that we need to make sure that we're being aware of that and changing our learning and not just using the same tools and resources year to year because our learners aren't the same year to year. So your task, because the session is wrapping up, is I want you to have some time to play around with some of those tools. Maybe you are playing around with me as I went through, but the idea here is that for the next few minutes, you practice and think of your learning environment. All right. So the document I have linked here is a planning document for you. And I showed you this at the beginning of the presentation, but it is just a helpful resource for thinking about how to use UDL as your guide and giving students options, considering what barriers might be there and what solutions you can provide, no tech or with tech. And then you can use some of the tech tools I gave you to help kind of provide some solutions here. So all the tech tools that I showed you today, and then some more, are all associated with the UDL framework. You can kind of apply those to your barriers and identify some possible solutions. And then if you want to share, because sharing is caring, we all grow from each other's wealth of knowledge and experience. There is another resource here, not to burden you with too many, but it's just an idea board. I love to put these in my presentations because I learn so much from people who participate in my sessions. Even as I'm presenting new tech tools and things, and some of the stuff in this presentation came from attending other tech conferences and seeing other people's ideas. So this is an idea board for you to share how some of the different tools that you learned or other tools that you're already using can help remove barriers in your learning environment. So to participate, you click the plus button, and that's how you can add your own little sticky note And this tool is called a Padlet, and it's kind of just like a virtual idea board. To wrap things up, just know that tech is not the end-all be-all. It's not going to solve all the problems and maybe make your learning environment more accessible on its own. Technology is only as good as the people behind it. And in this case, teachers. Teachers are what make the magic happen in your learning environment. And if we're using UDL as our source for deciding what tech tools we use, then our learning environment is going to be better off. So if we're using UDL, we don't focus on the tech first, we focus on the goal first. So make tech purposeful by making sure it connects to your learning goal and is supportive of that it's not limiting of students reaching that goal. Plan for learner variability. Don't just give one tech tool to students and expect that to be something that's going to work for everyone. Give options. Maybe some of those options don't involve technology. Plan for accessibility. Be a champion of that. Use tools that are flexible for learners and support different languages and different visual supports. Use UDL to identify learner barriers and use UDL to identify solutions to those. So remember, we don't have control over variability. That's what makes our learners unique. It's what makes them them. We do have control over some of the barriers in our learning environment, and technology can help us address some of those barriers if we use UDL. And again, ask students for feedback. Use UDL as your guide so you remove barriers, not create them. If you want to have more UDL resources, there are ideas here. It's a blog that I run. If you have ideas and want to be featured on it, let me know. If you have any issues adding some of these extensions, share the spreadsheet with your IT staff and they can unblock them for you. Just a helpful tip, having worked on the technology side of things. If you want to see more resources on UDL and ed technology, those are some there. And get in touch if you have questions. I'm here to help. I know I put a lot of information in this session. If there's anything I can help clarify, if you want more resources, please let me know. Don't be a stranger. And thank you for using technology effectively and being an EdTech and UDL